Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be looking at three storms out in the Atlantic. We have Tropical Storm Fred, Tropical Depression Grace, and then we have Tropical Depression 8, which is out near Bermuda, and it'll kind of be circling around there. We also have the potential for more storms out in the Eastern Atlantic. We'll briefly be talking about that later on in today's video. It's probably going to be a longer one, probably upwards of 20 minutes long, because we have to cover all three of these storms and go through in depth what could happen with all of them. So we're going to be covering that. If you have any questions, just leave a comment down below and I'll be responding to pretty much all of them if you want to. And if you haven't already, check out the long range forecasts that are on my channel. We have, of course, the winter forecast, the fall forecast, the snowfall forecast, when you'll see your first snowfall, when you'll see your first frost, fall foliage forecast, all of that. Those were my most recent videos on this channel, so go check that out. Also, one more note, this is coming out before the 11 a.m. Eastern Time update. So I'm recording this around 10:20 a.m. Eastern Time. The new update will be around 11 a.m. So I won't have the most up-to-date information. You can check that out on the National Hurricane Center page, although I'm assuming this is not going to change a whole lot within the 3 hours between each update. So let's get right into it. Let's start off with your National Weather Service page. You can see that we have some air quality alerts in effect for the Northwest, as well as some heat advisories in effect for the Southwest. We have some red flag warnings in parts of Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming, as well as some flood watches in parts of Arizona, New Mexico, and a little bit of Texas. We have more flash flood warnings in effect for Georgia and Alabama, and then we have tropical storm warnings in effect for the Panhandle of Florida and a little bit of Georgia and Alabama. We also have some tornado watches in effect for parts of northern Florida and into southern Georgia from this severe weather event / tropical storm Fred. Yesterday, we had a high temperature of 122 degrees in Death Valley, California, with a low temperature of 34 degrees in Stanley, Idaho. The highest rainfall report was in Orleans, Nebraska, where they got 3.72 inches of rainfall. No snowfall reports as of yesterday. Here's a look at the 5-day outlook from the National Hurricane Center page. You can see that we have Tropical Storm Fred, which is currently up near the Panhandle of Florida. We have Tropical Depression Grace, which is right now just south of Hispaniola. And then we have Tropical Depression 8, which is right to the east of Bermuda. Bermuda is right here. So it's just a few miles to the east of there. That one is going to be spinning around and kind of just curving around the island of Bermuda. So we're going to be talking about all of these again in depth. We're going to start off with Tropical Storm Fred because that is the one that is closest to the United States and is almost going to make landfall within the next few hours. So talking about Tropical Storm Fred, it's located about 28.6 degrees north by 85.8 degrees west, maximum winds of 50 miles per hour, minimum pressure of 1,002 millibars, moving north at 9 miles per hour. So it is moving fairly slowly, which is helping it to develop a little bit more. The fact that the northern edge, which is the strongest part of the storm, is on land right now, it's right around here, is helping the storm to is kind of making the storm a little bit weaker than what it was just a few hours ago now, because that strongest part of the storm is on land. So again, this storm is now in the weakening phase, but its very slow movement is going to cause some troubles, especially along this area right here with flash flooding. And then, of course, you're going to have the sustained winds, which will also be quite high. Currently at the center of the storm, we have maximum winds of around 50 miles per hour, so quite high. And we've even seen some reports up near 55 miles per hour. So we do have some very strong winds through the storm. And the fact that this is moving slowly is definitely not helping it at all. Taking a look at the current satellite imagery of the storm, you can see that, again, the northern edge of it is the strongest, and that part of it is currently in northern Florida, southern Georgia, and a little bit of Alabama. The center of the storm is right here, and again, it's moving very close to the Panhandle of Florida, so probably within the next few hours, we're going to see this make landfall. It's moving very slowly, so it might take a little bit longer than expected, but it will still make landfall, and by that point, that's when it's going to really start to weaken a lot more, and it'll become more of a rain event, and that'll be the main concern instead of the winds, which are currently the main concern of this storm. Taking a look at the infrared satellite, you can see how strong the storm actually is. It is weakening. If you were to look at the loop of this, you would see that just about an hour ago, it was much stronger. You were dealing with these deep black colors, which indicate very strong convection, and they were covering a large majority of this northern flank of the storm. Now that's being a little bit suppressed. Now we're only into the orange and the orange and the red colors. Still a quite strong storm, but it is at least weakening, and that's a good sign. We are seeing that at least on the satellite imagery, it is weakening. Again, it might be in the process of briefly strengthening a little bit. It might be starting to strengthen by going through a weakening phase and then potentially strengthening once again. Some of those storms do that, so it can be a little bit misleading. As the center of the storm moves on land, as it eventually moves over the Panhandle of Florida, and once it moves into that area, that's when I think most of the weakening will happen. So right now we're dealing with gradual weakening. The southern edge of the storm is actually strengthening a little bit, but the part that's actually on land is weakening. And again, probably within the next 6 hours, we're going to see this weaken quite a lot. Taking a look at the key messages for Tropical Storm Fred. The first one says, through Tuesday, heavy rainfall may lead to flash urban and small stream and isolated river flooding, which impacts across the southeast. By the middle of the week, as Fred lifts northward and inland, heavy rainfall and flooding will impact the southern and central Appalachians and the Piedmont of the southeast and the middle Atlantic. The second key message from the National Hurricane Center reads, dangerous storm surge inundation is possible along portions of the coast of the Florida Panhandle and the Florida Big Bend region, and a storm surge warning is in effect for this area. Interest in these areas should follow any advice given by local officials. And then the third one just says, tropical storm conditions are expected in the tropical storm warning area beginning later this morning. So taking a look at the cone from the National Hurricane Center, it is expected to stay as a tropical storm, even as it is on land. But again, you are going to start to see that weakening as it gets into central Georgia and central Alabama, right along the border there. That's when it's going to finally weaken to a tropical depression, probably sometime tomorrow morning, tomorrow late in the morning into the early afternoon, and then it's getting quite weak as it's moving up into Tennessee, but we still do have some flooding concerns in those areas. And again, you have that tropical storm warning in effect for the coastal part of the Panhandle of Florida, and that actually extends even further inland than that. Taking a look at the model guidance, you can see that this storm is expected to move pretty much up along the spine of the Appalachians and then move up through parts of West Virginia and then eventually into the Northeast, where you kind of see some of the models bring it up into Canada, some of them bring it out to sea. It doesn't really matter what happens with it up there because it's mostly just going to be rainy, not really any tropical impacts by that point. It'll be ex-tropical, and we're not really going to see anything, again, too major once it moves into this area. You really want to pay attention if you live, I would say, from eastern Tennessee and on southward. That's where you have a decent shot of seeing some sort of tropical impacts / maybe a few flash flooding alerts and warnings may pop up over the next few days because of all that rainfall. Taking a look at the rainfall, you can see that we have expected 4 to 10 inches. So in the yellows, we have 4 to 6 inches and then 6 to 10 inches in that orange. And you can see that's a little stripe which goes from the Panhandle of Florida all the way up into Alabama, Georgia, a little bit of South Carolina, and then into North Carolina. Would not be surprised if they extend that a little bit further west, depending on what the model guidance does. We could see this band shift a little bit, again, a little bit further to the west if this storm is originally further to the west. If the storm tracked a little bit further to the east, of course, this area of heavy rainfall will also track a little bit further to the east. You can see that the rest of these areas are expecting just about 1 to 4 inches of rainfall. Again, these heaviest areas of rainfall are going to be up along the southern Appalachians and then into the southeast. Taking a look at the shot of flash flooding, you can see that it's highest over the southern Appalachians and then also in the Panhandle of Florida, but we have a general slight risk which pretty much covers the entirety of the eastern third of the country except for some of the coastal areas. So we have a fairly good shot of some flash flooding, especially in parts of the southeast. I would say this corridor right here is where we have the highest chance of seeing flash flooding and heavy rainfall out of this storm. Taking a look at the storm surge forecast from the National Hurricane Center, most of these areas looking at 1 to 3 feet, and that goes from the Alabama-Florida border all the way down through the Big Bend of Florida. But we do have a few areas that could be a little bit higher. Between Indian Pass and the Steinhatchee River, we have 3 to 5 foot storm surge, so a little bit higher within this area. And the reason is because we're dealing with the winds coming onshore like this. Over these areas, we're dealing with the winds coming down like this, so it will help to ease the storm surge just a little bit. And again, the storm surge will be at its highest in the northern Big Bend of Florida. You have 2 to 4 foot between the Steinhatchee River and Yankeetown, Florida. So right in this stretch here, 2 to 4 foot storm surge. We do have some coastal flooding impacts that are possible, and if you live along the coast, you do want to be paying attention to what the local officials are saying about the storm. Taking a look at the intensity guidance, we have 2 outlier models which are keeping this as a tropical storm. I would not really take too much note into that because they are, again, outliers. The vast majority of these storms have this within the next 12 hours, weakening drastically down into a tropical depression and then eventually into an ex-tropical storm, sustaining winds of maybe around 20 miles per hour at the most. So not really anything too major after the storm moves on land, but again, the coastal areas of Florida and Alabama may have some fairly decent impacts, especially along that northern Big Bend area, because the winds will be moving straight up through there in a northward direction. So that could cause, of course, a lot of storm surge and also just damaging winds in general. Taking a look at the shot of seeing tropical storm force winds, it's highest in through the panhandle of Florida, and then you can see you get further to the north, and mainly the chances of seeing tropical storm winds are much lower. And again, up into this area, main threat out of this storm is going to be rainfall. Really nothing in terms of seeing anything in terms of winds up into that region. Taking a look at the aircraft recon, we also do have some fairly high flight level winds. If you look at the chart at the top left, you can see that we do have many times where the aircraft passes through the storm, where we're dealing with winds maybe gusting up near 50 to 60 knots. We're looking at more of a sustained wind of, I would say, 50 knots, which is around 55 miles per hour. So we'll have to see if in the next update they do upgrade that to maybe 55 miles per hour or maybe closer to 50 knots. So we'll have to see what they do with the next 11 a.m. update. Again, I'm recording this before that update just by about half an hour, so I can get this video to you guys earlier because this storm is about to make landfall within just a couple of hours. Taking a look at the actual map of this, you can see that the strongest winds are right here, kind of where Florida kind of juts out a little bit right before the Big Bend starts to kind of take shape. So you can see that we do have those strongest winds, even a few areas gusting up near hurricane strength. It's not sustained, so we can't really get a good idea of whether they will upgrade to a hurricane, just because these are these are peak winds, meaning that we're not dealing with anything sustained at that level. But again, we are dealing with gusts to hurricane force. Whether that can stay at that level and it can sustain that level will depend on whether they will actually turn this into a Category 1 hurricane. We'll have to see. It is definitely a possibility with this storm. Moving on to Tropical Depression Grace, which is currently just south of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So Haiti is right over here, Dominican Republic just to the right of it. 17.4 degrees north by 70.9 degrees west. Maximum winds of 35 miles per hour, minimum pressure of 1,008 millibars, moving west at 15 miles per hour. If we look at the satellite imagery, you can see that the bulk of the storm is actually over the mountainous terrain of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So that is helping to break it apart, although it is going through the very, very favorable waters just south of Cuba, pretty much untapped. From last year, we did not see, I don't even remember a single storm which actually passed through here for a decent amount of time and kind of used all that energy. So we have very warm waters. We have high amounts of ocean heat content stored up there. We haven't seen a storm move through there the entire Atlantic hurricane season, so it's just been kind of baking up, and we're not dealing with any water cooling or upwelling within that region. So if it moves into that area, and if it can stay held together, which it looks like it could, this could definitely be become our next big storm that we want to watch out for, and it will be, and it is expected to move pretty much straight west northwest. So it will be passing over this area, and that's something that we want to watch out for, especially if you live in, let's say, Jamaica, or if you live in Cuba. There are definitely some areas that you want to watch out for in the Caribbean, and then also into central and southern Mexico. They could be impacted by this storm as well. Taking a look at the key messages for this storm. Heavy rainfall across the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Cuba, Jamaica, and the Cayman Islands may lead to flash urban and small stream flooding with the potential for mudslides, highest in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, of course, because of the higher terrain. The second one says tropical storm conditions are possible over portions of Hispaniola today and tonight, and there is a risk of some wind and rainfall impacts across southeastern Cuba and Jamaica beginning Tuesday morning, and the Cayman Islands by Tuesday night. Interest in these areas should monitor the progress of Grace and updates to the forecast. So those are the key messages from the National Hurricane Center. Taking a look at their track, they're expecting that by Tuesday afternoon, this turns into a tropical storm. Would not be surprised if this becomes a Category 1 hurricane at least. We have tropical storm watches, which are up through the entirety of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, as well as much of Jamaica as well. So some of these Caribbean islands do have those tropical storm watches already up. I would not be surprised if they put it up for the south shore of Cuba as well. And then also later on, if they put some of them up for, let's say, eastern Mexico, and then also into the northern tip of that little peninsula in Mexico as well. So this storm is expected to be actually quite strong, and again, it's moving over those very favorable waters just south of Cuba that have not been touched in quite a while by any storms, meaning that it's in prime condition for one of these storms to move through there and strengthen quite quickly, and it will stay over water for a majority of its time. So this storm, Tropical Depression Grace, even though it's weaker than Tropical Storm Fred, I think has a lot more potential, and I really want to pay attention to this because we've seen storms like this quickly rapidly intensify pretty much overnight. So we really want to monitor this. I think this is going to be a big deal over the next few days. Taking a look at the track, you can see that we're actually fairly set on where it's going to be. We have most of the models within this kind of tight grip, and then we have a few outlier models. We have two to the south and two to the north. I think, again, we're probably going to be seeing somewhere right in the middle, like what these models are showing. You can see that it moves through the northern part of Jamaica, probably will have some impacts in Cuba, then moves into parts of Mexico, back over the Gulf of Mexico, and then into eastern Mexico as we get later on, as we go over the next 5 days. So by this weekend, it should be moving, by later this week into this weekend, it should be moving into the Gulf of Mexico, and it could definitely strengthen quite a lot as it's within those very warm waters. Taking a look at the shot of tropical storm force winds, I think this is quite low from the National Hurricane Center. I would expect these to rise quite highly over the next few days. We have 20 to 30% chance, meaning that the highest chance is within this little stripe here. Luckily, most of that does stay offshore of these Caribbean islands and offshore of Mexico, so the strongest winds are expected to be offshore, although again, we still do have that threat in some of the Caribbean islands and also into Mexico, that we do see some on land quite strong winds. So that is something that we want to pay attention to. And again, I'm going to track this storm quite closely. I think it has a lot more potential than Fred, which is already weakening, and it has definitely much more potential than Tropical Depression 8, which is up near Bermuda, and that's what we're going to be talking about in just a moment. Taking a look at the intensity guidance, you can see that right now it's a very strong, or it's a quite strong tropical depression, almost up to tropical storm status. Most of the models have this, pretty much every model has this becoming a tropical storm. Almost half of the models have this becoming Category 1, even some of them up near Category 2. So it's like 50-50 split mainly. We have half the models staying below that Category 1 line. We have the other half going above there. We're going to have to see whether that does happen. I would say definitely there's a quite good shot that we see this become a hurricane over the next couple of days. And out of all the storms in the Atlantic right now, this one definitely has the most potential, in my opinion. Taking a look at the aircraft reconnaissance data, you can see that we currently have winds that are sustained and gusting up near 30 to 35 miles per hour. You can see that they went over the open water, so you kind of saw a dip in that chart just a little bit down here. So that's why we don't see as strong winds there. But as they re-entered the storm, they found winds of about 30 knots. So you go a few knots higher than that, and you would be up near tropical storm status. It's a very strong tropical depression into a weak tropical storm. So it's right around that area, and I would expect that trend to continue. I think it will be strengthening quite rapidly after it moves through the Dominican Republic and Haiti. As it moves through there, and once it moves to the west of there, it'll have a fairly good shot of strengthening quite nicely. You can see that the northern and eastern side of the storm is the strongest. We still want to see more development on the southern end of the storm to really see if that storm can develop as nicely as we think it does and as nicely as it could potentially. Looking at Tropical Depression 8, this is the one up near Bermuda, located at 31.7 degrees north by 62.8 degrees west, maximum winds of 35 miles per hour, minimum pressure of 1,012 millibars, moving south at 9 miles per hour. Taking a look at the satellite imagery, here's Bermuda right here, and then here's that storm to the southeast of it. You can see that it's not too strong. We're expecting this to pass to the south of Bermuda and then kind of make a track up to the north again. So again, I don't think we're going to see too many impacts from over Bermuda. It looks like this will probably be dodging it, but the southern tip of Bermuda might interact with the northern end of the storm. Could cause some impacts, but this is not looking like an awfully strong storm. It does have some potential, but by the point that it could potentially be strengthening, it'll already be over the open Atlantic waters, and we really won't have too much to deal with in that regard. Taking a look at the storm, it is expected to become a tropical storm, but it is moving to the south of Bermuda, and it is moving to the west of Bermuda over the next few days. You can see that it's not going to be moving quite fast. It's only moving at about 9 miles per hour, and it might even slow down even further than that as we go through the next few days. So you can see that by this morning, it's going to be right here, and then by tomorrow morning, it's expected to be right here. So just a few more miles to the southwest. Again, this is moving at a fairly slow pace compared to some of the other storms, which are also in the Atlantic as of right now. Taking a look at the model the model track guidance, you can see that we have this storm expected to kind of make a loop around Bermuda and then eventually up to the northeast of Bermuda, and that'll move into the northern Atlantic. Again, Bermuda is right within here. And again, it's not going to have too many impacts on the island itself, so we're not expecting anything major over Bermuda from Tropical Depression 8. If we look at the chances of seeing tropical storm force winds, we have about a 50-50 shot in Bermuda, especially for the southern end of the island. That's where it has the best chance of seeing tropical storm winds. I would say that some tropical storm winds and some flash flooding in some areas would be the biggest concerns with the storm. You can see that this is expected to sustain tropical storm strength, but it's not expected to really gain any strength after the next 48 hours. So it will kind of just stay as a steady mid-level tropical storm. We're not expecting any big spikes in the intensity. We're not expecting this to go up to Category 1 status. It should stay as a mid-level tropical storm, kind of just circling around the central Atlantic. Something I want to talk about is the upper air pattern, because this is something that I think has really been quite noticeable with some of these storms so far, and that's the fact that we have separated low and upper centers of the storm. So a good example would be that storm up near Bermuda. Again, here's Bermuda right there, and if we look at the storm, the low pressure center at the lower levels of the atmosphere, at the surface of the atmosphere, is right up here. If we look at the upper air wind barbs, you can see that we would expect the low pressure to be right here. So it is disconnected by a little bit. If we look at the storm down near Haiti and also Haiti and the Dominican Republic, you can see that we have the low pressure center right here. And then if you were to look at the wind barbs, you would expect the upper air center to be somewhere down here. So it is quite separated. This is expected to kind of join up together. We're expected to see that kind of fix itself up over the next couple of days with that storm down in the Caribbean, but that is a concern, and it could definitely lead to it weakening a little bit. Tropical Storm Fred is quite stacked upon itself, so we're not dealing with too much separation between the upper and lower level low pressure centers. But you can see here's the upper level low pressure center. Here's the lower level low pressure center. We do see a little bit of an east-west shift, but it's not too dramatic within Tropical Storm Fred. Much more dramatic within Tropical Depression 8 and Tropical Depression Grace. So we do have some concerns with that, and that is something that could lead to this potentially weakening a little bit. I would say it's unlikely, but we do need to look at these tiny clues, which can really help us figure out what's actually going to happen with these storms, because it can be difficult just looking at surface analysis to figure out what's happening. You kind of have to go up a few thousand feet up in the atmosphere to actually figure out what's happening. Taking a look at the wind shear, you can see that we are dealing with a decent amount of wind shear up near Tropical Storm Fred, so that should help it weaken, especially as it makes landfall. It'll be over land and it should be weakening by that point. Something that worries me is that we have a lack of wind shear as you move into this whole area. Here's Tropical Depression Grace, which is expected to become a tropical storm and has a shot of being a hurricane, and you look at the amount of wind shear, and it's close to none within this entire area. So the entire track of the storm, as of right now, has no wind shear within it. We would expect some wind shear to move in and build up throughout the week, but I don't think it's going to be enough to really stop the storm in its tracks. And then if we look at Tropical Depression 8, we have some northerly wind shear coming in from the north, and that should prevent it from strengthening too much. It should kind of hold it level, but something that, again, is more concerning to me is what's happening with Tropical Depression Grace. I think that has a good shot of becoming a fairly strong storm. So again, this was a fairly long video. Usually most of my videos I like to keep under 15 minutes, but with this we have 3 storms. We have a ton to talk about, so I did have to kind of extend it a little bit. If you did stay through the entire video, thank you very much. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications so you never miss a video. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.